Hey everyone, we are here to review period 1 for AP World History, which is going to kind of be from the beginning all the way up until 600 BCE, again, before Common Era. So a few things that we want you to make sure that you know as you are getting ready for this test. Now, first of all, we want to make sure that you are very aware of the different world regions. So that if you ever got a multiple choice question or an essay question that asked about a specific region, you knew what that was. So as we're looking at this, we want to make sure that we know ultimately East Asia is going to be China for us, and Japan is mostly what we're going to be looking for. So as you're looking at that, you want to make sure you know that every time we say East Asia, China and Japan. South Asia, then, we are mostly talking about India. Modern-day Pakistan is in that area as well, and then Afghanistan is kind of this overlapping kind of area between the Middle East and South Asia and Central Asia. So just so that you're aware of that. Southeast Asia, then, as you can see over here, is we are talking about Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And so as you're looking at this area, I want to make sure that you know the difference between East Asia, South Asia, and then Southeast Asia. Now, Central Asia, as you can see also on here, is another region. The Middle East also will sometimes be called Southwest Asia. We call it the Middle East because if you are over in Europe, that would be the middle between East Asia and where Europe is. So many times people will call it Southwest Asia because as you kind of are looking here, it's south and the western side of the continent of Asia. Those are going to be key, especially with your periods 1 through 3, as we are looking at the first half of this course. Middle East is important, where we just drew that X. We see Europe. Above those Central Asia, East Asia, we have what we know today as of Russia, so be aware of that. When we're looking at Africa, North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and then East Africa along what we know as the Swahili coast. And so for this part of the course, these are the main things that you need to be aware of. Now, as we are looking at kind of the beginning, we want to make sure that we know what the Paleolithic era is. Paleolithic is going to be kind of, as we are talking about, standing for Old Stone Age. Old Stone Age. Now, when we're saying that, the key word there is actually stone. The thing you want to know is this is before we ever get to a point where we have agriculture. So this is pre-agriculture, Stone Age. Archaeological evidence indicates that during the Paleolithic, Old Stone Age era, hunting and foraging bands of humans gradually migrated from, and this is kind of where we talk about this, from East Africa, moving out of this area and into these other areas was kind of the first migration. Ultimately, then, we're going to see we're going to have migrations into Australia, and then if you kind of go around the map down here, we're going to see migrations the rest of the way. So, ultimately, kind of the last migrations of where human beings were, we're going to see ultimately Oceania, which is not really on the map, but also then South America as we're looking at these migrations for where humans are in the Old Stone Age. When we're talking about hunting, foraging bands, pre-agriculture, people are moving around, hunting and gatherers during this time period. During the Paleolithic time, we want to remember again that people are using stone tools, they're using fire. These are the things that they are using during this time period. Now, the Neolithic, as we're looking at this, would stand for the New Stone Age. But the bigger thing that we want to know is that this really equals the time of agriculture, okay? So, time of agriculture. So, this is between, this is the time this is starting, is about 10,000 years ago. So, we're talking around 8,000 BCE roughly. That this is going to begin. And the Neolithic Revolution led to the development of more complex economic and social systems. Now, if we think back to the beginning of the Survivor Challenge, the different tribes were different river valleys. And so we have the Nile River Valley over here as one of those early areas that turned and started instead of hunting and gathering, moving to agriculture. The very first one was in the Fertile Crescent, as we look at the Tigris and Euphrates region, looking ultimately at ancient Mesopotamia, the cities of Sumer and Babylon, etc. We then know we have the Indus River Valley, where we have the Harappan and Mohenjo-Daro cities. Ultimately, we're going to get into the Vedic civilizations that are going to be in India and Pakistan, and then ultimately we talked about the Yellow River Valley. And so in these areas we have these ancient river valley civilizations that develop and have some key things. And so remember, Paleolithic, Old Stone Age, Neolithic is a time where, quote unquote, it's the New Stone Age, but really we're talking about the use of agriculture. And because of the use of agriculture, people can settle, and because people are settling, we get these other things. So, because of this, it transforms human societies. This food surplus, which was necessary first, allowed to, which is analysis as you look here, led to all of these other things that we're seeing here. So, traits of a civilization, if you're looking at this, these are the different traits of a civilization. Now, if we're looking at these traits, these are kind of the stepping stones, the basics. So because there is food surplus, because people don't need to be out and hunting and gathering, and now we have a surplus of food, not everyone needs to focus on hunting and gathering or even growing the food. So now we can have specialization of labor. So there can be other duties and different tasks and different jobs for people. And so other people will become artists. Other people are going to trade different things. They're going to make different things. Kind of our early craft industries, as from the study guide, talks about textiles and pottery and metallurgy, or working with metals. Social stratification is a fancy way to say that there's a social structure, that not everyone is equal, as we saw like was back in the Paleolithic era. We're going to see increased trade. We're going to see complex government systems. So we're going to see that there's going to be some sort of government that exists. We're going to have religious systems. As we talk about kind of in this time, we have early religions beginning. As we look at early Judaism, known as Hebrew monotheism, as we are looking at the Vedic religions in that River Valley civilization, we see the different Egyptian religious beliefs. They were going to have armies as these kind of different civilizations develop to defend themselves. We see record keeping that exists as well through different types of writing. So we've talked about like hieroglyphics or cuneiform. And ultimately kind of all these things lead to, as we see here, increasing populations. Okay? Increased populations, more people are settling together, which obviously means that there's an increase in urbanization as well. People are living in cities, they're living around the rivers, and that begins to grow steadily during the Neolithic era, this time of agriculture. So as we're looking at the Neolithic era, we can say some other different things. We have new technological innovations that develop, the composite bow, which is basically your bow and arrow. Iron weapons, where they're actually using metals that they couldn't do before when they were just using stone tools and fire. Now, during the Neolithic era, they can develop tools from metals because there's a surplus, because not everyone has to be hunting and gathering. They have development of chariots, which we saw the Hittites and the Hyksos use. People start riding horses. We have basic record keeping that goes back to that trait of there's a record system or writing. And so we have these different types of writing that exist at this time. And then also we have different types of monumental architecture or different types of building. So we have ziggurats, which are stepped pyramids, regular pyramids, very nice drawing there. We have different temples, defensive walls. So if we had a city, around the city, people would be building walls, and the city would then be behind it, okay? So they're protecting themselves with defensive walls. We see early cities all had walled around them. We know that one of the biggest later on, as we get to Constantinople much later, is one of the best cities that has huge defensive walls around them, very hard to penetrate. We have different roads that are going to be developed over time, and then different water systems. And we're not talking about trade necessarily, we're talking more about irrigation of these different water systems. Ultimately, we see kind of the first law code develop, which is the Code of Hammurabi during the Babylonian Empire. And so the Code of Hammurabi, we know the eye for an eye, as we are looking at that. And so when we're looking at an eye for an eye, one of the biggest things that we are thinking about is how these punishments are kind of equal in some ways, unless, again, we're looking at the social status during this time. And if you were someone that was kind of higher class and you committed the crime, maybe you just have to pay some things. But if you were a lower class, your punishment may be more severe. So different things as we looked at these early river valley civilizations kind of kicking off the course. Here are the few main things that you need to know from period 1 as we review.